Welcome to this interview, Krzysztof Michalski, CEO of BillerudKorsnäs.
Good morning, Emily. I'm very nice to be here. Thank you.
So due to corona restrictions, the annual general meeting will be run a little bit differently this year. Can you tell us more about that?
Yes, so unfortunately, because of the pandemic restriction, we're not allowed to do a physical meeting. So we will have a meeting where shareholders can only participate by sending in questions and doing the vote by post. It follows the legislation. We are very sorry for that I'm not be able, therefore, to meet all shareholders in person. And this is also the reason why we made this little film in this little interview, and I hope it will give our shareholders at least some insight what happened last year.
Now, you are new to many of the shareholders, right? Can you give us a little background on yourself and your experience?
Yes, I can do that. So I just basically worked 5 years in China. I was based in Hong Kong, was CEO of a listed company who does hygiene product in Asia and in particular in China. We were the market leader in tissue products, and it was a very exciting time. And I initially came from Essity, and working in Essity, even if I was more focused on the hygiene part of the business, I got to know the forest business. And I saw many characteristics like down to earth and very pragmatic and entrepreneurial. And I recognized a lot of these characteristics in BillerudKorsnäs. And this was one of the reasons why I was quite attracted when I had the opportunity to join. On a more private side, I'm married with Anna. She's a Swedish woman from Västervik, but probably most people know of you. And we have 4 grown-up children. We speak French at home because I grew up in France and we met in France. And my Swedish is still very, very, very basic. So I'm sorry that this interview is actually conducted in English. Otherwise, we have a lot of hobbies. Like most Swedes, we have a summer house, we go sailing, we go hiking, we like the outdoors. And it's an absolute pleasure to be back in Sweden and having joined BillerudKorsnäs.
Now, let's get into the year that's now passed. It was obviously the year of a pandemic. How did BillerudKorsnäs meet the challenges of the pandemic?
Yes, the pandemic was a huge challenge, and I don't think just for BillerudKorsnäs, I think for the whole society, all companies. So we focused on 3 levels. Clearly, the first one was for our employees who are working in an environment where they have to work there, i.e. our mills. And here, a lot of measures were taken to ensure social distancing, to create a safe working environment, disinfection, test and trace. And I think over the time we learned how to deal with that and even were able to do our maintenance work in the second part of the year. The second level is the people who don't need to be present. And we try to support them to basically encourage them to work from home. And to encourage them to create even an environment where they can work from home. But I think that has been very challenging. I think combining a family with your workplace is not easy. And for those who live on their own, this was clearly a very testing time, being socially nearly isolated rather than just social distance. So that was probably tough, and I'm looking forward for our employees to come back to the office. The third area was the work with customers and suppliers. Clearly, normally we have meetings, there are processes in place and things like that, and suddenly everything moved online. So that created also a bit of a challenge. In addition to that, the pandemic has quite disrupted world trade, and therefore logistics, generally speaking, since April were very difficult to manage. And I hope that most of our customers got their products in time and in specs.
So despite the pandemic then, what were some of your major achievements over this past year?
So I think there are a number of things where we made great progress. I think the first one is we are still a little bit behind in productivity when it comes to the overall production, and I think we have made great progress over last year, resulting in a record production in the 4th quarter. Secondly, we have a flagship board machine, KM7, that many of you have heard about. This was really 2020 was a ramp up of that machine. And I think we have seen very good progress around that. We moved from trial runs to real production. The real production output of the paper was actually better in terms of quality and specs than we anticipated. And with a little bit of startup difficulties in 2019, I think 2020 ended with KM7 starting really to show its potential and where we're going. And this also will continue in 2021. The third things we did is we reorganized and simplified the company quite drastically in the summer. And I think this has liberated a lot of communication and ways of working and things like that. So I'm very pleased with that. That was even prior that I arrived. And I was very pleased to inherit an organization which was very simple and to some extent easy to manage. Last but not least, we have a lot of cost-saving programs ongoing, and we continue to work very hard on that. Cost is something you have to work all the time with, not just 1 year, but every year, and I think we made great progress in 2020. And we also, despite all these things, could maintain our leading position in the Dow Jones Sustainability Index, which is clearly a fantastic achievement for a company like ours, where we really want to challenge conventional packaging for a sustainable future.
Well, along those lines then, let's talk a little bit more about the challenges of climate change and how BillerudKorsnäs can be part of the solution.
All right. Clearly, climate change is the subject of our times. I think the pandemic is kind of a crisis while the climate change is happening, and we had to deal this year with a pandemic, but climate change is really what we need to focus on. BillerudKorsnäs is already 97% fossil-free in terms of production, and that has to do because we make our own pulp, we produce our own paper, and then we have a lot of the opportunity to use things as biofuel and to fire our steam and things like that. We also set down our science-based targets for 2030 and 2050, and they're really about making our own production entirely fossil-free, but then also working with our suppliers and our customers to reduce fossil utilization when it comes to transport, when it comes to chemical we are buying in for our production, when it comes to the periphery of our business, which is not directly controlled by us. So the value chain as such is important, and in order to be very focused and very precise with it, we do a lot of life cycle analysis of the component we buy and the products we make. And that also helps then our customers to get their act together, to get raw materials from our side, which are basically following this. I think our largest contribution is when we come up with products, materials or innovations which are replacing fossil-based packaging. So for example, every time you replace a plastic with a paper, you have a very, very significant positive impact in this thing. So I think not only we are reducing fossil utilization, but also we are contributing to the cyclical economy because our products can be very easily recycled and reused.
Can you give us some examples of some of the new fiber-based packaging solutions?
Yes, I can do that. Let me maybe take three, because I think they're quite telling. The first one, as I mentioned, is replacing plastic. It's an important part. And we developed a product. It's a flow wrap, but in paper. And flow wrap is basically this type of packaging material that you see in chocolate bars and these type of things. So it's a paper. It has a barrier, which works very well with this type of chocolate products. You basically, and you can apply it on other food products as well. It's used by the same machines which are normally flow wrapping plastic on these type of application. And here with very, very little cost, additional cost of just fine-tuning the machine, you can use the paper material instead of the plastic material, and the balance in order of the sustainability balance is very good. Another product is Express e-commerce, which is basically the attempt of creating very strong paper-based bags, which are replacing the traditional bags you see in e-commerce. When you get a pack at home, it's normally plastic packed. And our challenge is really how can we create packaging solution that can replace this plastic. And as you know, e-commerce, in particular in the pandemic, has really exploded. So very important. And then maybe a little bit more in the future, we're also working on a very exciting project which is called Paboko, which is a paper bottle company. It's a paper bottle company, and the idea is to basically replace PET bottles by paper bottles. And the biggest challenge clearly is a barrier. So the paper should not dissolve when it gets wet. So today our first generation was a bottle which uses only 47% of the plastic, and the rest was basically paper as a main structure. And our aim in the third generation is to have a totally paper-based bottle which can be recycled in your paper recycling and has no significant plastic components. So that is kind of 3 examples of what future packaging could look like or will look like.
So there are many political initiatives driving the shift towards renewable and recyclable packaging. Do you see the new regulations as a threat or an opportunity?
I think it's mostly an opportunity. I mean, the European Green Deal, I think, is a good example of an initiatives which creates a level playing field, so everybody has to comply to these new regulations. It doesn't disadvantage one company against the other. The second is it actually forces us to work with our supply and our customers together. It's nothing that you as a single company can really achieve. To give you one example, we are working incredibly hard with our liquid packaging producers to develop barriers where we can take out aluminium or plastic out of these liquid packaging cartons. And these initiatives clearly are really accelerated because the regulator is behind. Then there's another aspect on regulation where we have to be very careful. We have to be careful that the regulation remains very scientifically based, okay, and not ideological as such. And we have to make sure that the regulation is not contradictory each other, depending. One example would be, yes, we want a renewable material, but then we want to manage the forest for biodiversity. And so there is a lot of difficult trade-offs to be done. And I hope that BillerudKorsnäs can be part of that discussion to help to find a good solution going forward.
So looking ahead then, at your priorities over the next few years, talk us through some of those.
Number 1, safety. We still have too many accidents. And fortunately, the gravity of the accident have gone down. But nevertheless, there's still too many. And we need to go to 0 accident at some stage. And that is the aim. Second one, which goes a bit hand in hand with that, is product stability. So clearly, I think when you run a factory in a very productive way, then generally speaking, you have less accidents because it's very well organized and processed and things like that. The product stability, as I mentioned before, is still we have some way to go. And that will, without any capex investment, will basically mean we can produce and grow our business for some more years to come. KM7, I talked about 2020, but in 2021, KM7 will break even as a machine and will really start to contribute. And it does it in 2 ways. First, we accelerate the productivity of the machine, and then we produce more and more valuable grades on the machine. And this double effect basically makes KM7 a key driver for us in 2021, 2022, 2023. And therefore this is one of our significant priorities. Cost saving continues, as I mentioned before. This is not a one-day project, it's a continuous thing, and we have set ourselves the internal target of saving another 300 million SEK in 2021. And we have started also to look at our strategic options after 2025. You have to understand that in our business, everything is very long term. As I mentioned before already, that's part of the culture, but it's also part of the business. And if we want to develop new growth opportunities in 2025 and beyond, we have to start today. So this is the main priorities: safety, product stability, KM7, efficiency, and basically developing these opportunities for the future.
What about investments? allocation of
Yes,
capital?
very good point. I mean, the largest investment nearly ever was probably KM7, which we have done, over the last 4 years. Today we have one very significant investment, which is in Frövi, which is our projects, we call it SPIAX, which is a rebuild of a recovery boiler. That project we announced in January and is now going on, and it's developing well. But I think other than that, this is a 2.6 billion Swedish crown investment. Other than that, I see more the capex being used for preventive maintenance and the continuous keeping up of our facilities. We have budget for the next 5 years about 1.3 billion, and we do not expect major renovation like the recovery boiler in Frövi. So I think these are the key projects, and clearly going forward, once we are clear what happens in 2025 and beyond, then we will see how our capex allocation has to go forward.
So we have received a few questions from the Swedish Shareholder Association, Aktiespararna, that I'd like you to answer. The first is, it's important that you are an attractive employer and able to attract the best talent. How can you ensure that you're doing so?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for Aktiespararna to sending some questions. I think that's fantastic. Attractive employer, I think there are 3 things which is always important for whatever company you are, and we're trying really hard to work on those. The first one is, I think you need an absolutely motivating company culture, because people should enjoy to come to work and do whatever they do. And clearly the company culture and its values and things like that are really important. The second point is great leadership. I mean, many people leave or join a company because they like the boss or they don't like the boss. And I think we try to develop our leaders in the company with a program which we call Sustainable Leadership. And it's really about for leaders to understand how they impact their environment and to know themselves and to understand what they do right and wrong. And the second thing is that they're able to develop a vision together with their team to create alignment and energy around what they have to achieve. And that is very important. The last one is, and we often forget one, people like to work for successful companies and they want to be successful in a successful company. And that is something we're working very hard. I mean, this is what the interview is all about. How do we make sure to be successful? And you have heard the story of 2020 and our opportunities in 2021. And then when it comes to being successful within BillerudKorsnäs, we are actually quite focused to ensure that we hire our people, once we have job openings, that we have internal recruitment and people are aware what jobs are around. And only when we do not find the talent or the capability, and it's mainly capability, then we will go outside.
A follow-up on this question. There is a current trend of people moving away from city centers, in part to the pandemic, but also sort of a global trend.
Yes.
Are we able to take advantage of this? For example, mills as workplaces?
Well, we have a very widespread footprint in Sweden because we have mills everywhere in the countryside, closer to cities, further to cities, in the north, in the south. And I think, yes, I mean, if people understand working close to home is great. And I think we have very interesting jobs and we are a very good employer. And on top of that, unlike many companies, even our mission statement says already that we want to challenge conventional packaging for a sustainable future. And that's the air of the time. And I think we are very, very competitive when it comes to create an attractive employer brand and attractive employment. And for the moment, I think we are pretty good at it.
Another question. Have you evaluated the value of regularly entering foreign exchange contracts? And what is the cost for these contracts?
So the biggest advantage of hedging or buying foreign exchange contracts is actually to smooth out a little bit the effect of exchange rates. And so we're doing that. We have a big business in euro terms and in dollar terms. And we are buying for an exchange contract on that. Per se, they do not cost money because you take a contract at a certain exchange rate, and then depending on what the exchange rate is 1 year later, you either win a little bit or you lose a little bit. So there's no direct cost, but it's more. If I look at BillerudKorsnäs, as most companies over time, our hedging costs go up and down and equal out over a period of time.
Do your lenders require foreign exchange contracts? And if so, do they provide benefits such as lower interest costs?
Not really. So they don't require hedging for us, but clearly, in order to be creditworthy, you have to be a not too volatile income, and you have to have a strong balance sheet, and you have to have a strong cash flow. And BillerudKorsnäs fortunately has all of those, and the foreign exchange contract helps us to smooth a little bit the effect of exchange rates on our results.
Thank you. Christoph, we're soon going to round off our conversation, but to end, is there anything you would like to say as a final word?
Yes, actually I would, Emily, thank you. So I would like to talk first to our customers, and really we appreciated your business in 2020, and we're looking forward to do business in 2021 as well. We will really work on our quality, we will work on our reliability, and we really hope that we will be able to better fulfill your needs in 21 and progress from there. The second one I would like to say is to our shareholders, and here it's really about saying thank you for your confidence and your support in BillerudKorsnäs, and I really hope we will be able to see you in person next year, and I'm looking forward to that. Thank you.
And thank you so much for your time today, Christoph.
Thank you, Emily. Thank you.